some something and I'll email it someone.
All right. Great. Enjoyed it. I appreciate you all coming. So we're going to continue on the same process. We're going to do it again like this.
This is all true even with material consumption. The main need is when one seeks.
Well, we're going to go on that public trade that Rabbi says he's taking us on.
Main need.
We're not recording sound, are we?
Seeks.
You should definitely know. We're coming with you.
Why can't you just want to it's a franchise. From the time of the spies, the speech, the prophecy of God did not isolate itself with Moshe. The death of the people of the war. All right. That's what he's saying. Beautiful. Hey, good times. I'm ready for the big show.
Okay, good evening, everyone. If I can please have your attention. Thank you, everyone, for coming out again every week to come and learn and be part of this wonderful program. I want to introduce our speaker for tonight, who is, before I get to that, I forgot. I wanted to just make a few small announcements. There is a wonderful event happening next Monday night, with Esther Walby, right? S.D. Walby, sorry. I've bad memory.
You know your Walbys?
Like a cooking demo thing, and it's Zahava Walby is running it, and it will be absolutely incredible. And if you want any information, you can go to her and ask her, and hope you all, it's for women, right? Yeah. So hope you all can make it. Okay, so now another thing that I wanted to mention is that in 2 weeks is Purim night. And it is also Partners in Torah, the same night. So we will again, the same thing like last year, how it fell on the same night. So we will again be having a special Partners in Torah Megillah reading over here. You're all welcome to come. You can bring your family and encourage your partners to come if they're not here tonight, or if you know anyone else that would be interested in coming. It will be a very nice and Megillah reading with everyone together, and there will be also time to learn afterwards.
Children are welcome.
Children are welcome, and there will be time if you would like to learn with your partner or with anyone that you bring, you can as well. It'll be a very nice evening. There'll also be some light refreshments to break the fast on. Okay, so now back to our speaker tonight. So just as all of you do make the time to come every week to Partners in Torah, this person has been coming for a pretty long time. I think since almost the beginning, since I started working here and doing Partners in Torah. And even though he is a very successful lawyer and is a very busy schedule, he still makes the time every week to come. And he was also, I don't believe this is his first time. It's not even his first time sponsoring, but he again requested to sponsor tonight a beautiful meal. So thank you, Nathaniel, Tarlow. Nathaniel Tarlow would like to say a few words as well tonight.
Thank you, Chaviva, and thank you all for coming out and honoring the neshama of Noah Tarlow. It really means a lot to me to see everybody here learning and growing and transforming spiritually. So, let's talk about this week's parashah. And it's an interesting one because normally this is a two-part parashah, V'yachel and Pekudei. But this year, unlike most years, is a leap year, so we have a second month of Adar, and we actually split them this year. So this week's parashah, in fact, by the way, Adar Bet, the second Adar, Rosh Chodesh is tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So don't forget. Anyway, so tonight I'm going to talk about Pekudei only because of the calendar this year making it a double portion divided into two portions. So let's talk about Pekudei, accounts, as it translates to. This is the last parashah in the book of Exodus. And like every parashah, there are so many hours and days and weeks we could spend talking about the various details and meanings and sub-meanings and things like that. So I'm not going to take too much time. I want to talk about a few concepts. And one of them is the fact that while this closes out the book of Exodus, it is in the book of Exodus that we transform into the Jewish people as a unit. Before that, there were Jews, but it was during Exodus that there was a Jewish people. Let's think about that. Exodus marks as the name suggests, Exodus from Egypt, and we left. We had a collective experience as slaves. We left, we crossed the Red Sea. That was the beginning of us as a community coming together. And then at Sinai, obviously we all know about the revelation at Sinai, all the people were present, quite a big event, and that too was a real binding of our people into one community. But let's think about this. The Exodus from Egypt, as far as the crossing of the Red Sea, the revelation at Sinai, those were single events. The Mishkan, once built, gave rise to consistency. In other words, we left Egypt once. We were at Mount Sinai once. But once the Mishkan was built, and that's what this parashah focuses on, the building of the Mishkan, now we had a centralized place to come and have religious worship, a place where judging of legal matters could occur, a community could grow around the Mishkan. And we needed the Mishkan, the nucleus, for the cell around it to grow. So, in previous weeks, we talked about the instructions that God gave in the building of the Mishkan, the blueprint, what metals to use, what types of woods to use, what kind of measurements, things like that. That's the plan. And here in this parashah, we have the plan being effectuated into a reality. This is the actual building of the Mishkan, which gave the Shekhinah a place to dwell, right here among the Jewish people. So, what's important to note is that this is a counterbalancing to the previous parashot, which talked about the instructions for building. This is the building. So, it's important to plan, but it's just as important, Hashem teaches us, to actually do. A plan is nothing more than an idea, a dream, an aspiration. It's when concrete action occurs, when the building occurs, that it really means something. Now, conversely, you can act, you can do, but if you do it without a plan, without thinking in advance, probably those actions are not going to be as successful as they could have been. So they're both very, very important, and there's a real balance component here. Now, it's important also to look at something else in this parashah, and that is that as we came together as a people, everybody was supposed to give something. Everybody had their own requirements for giving, for doing, for participating. And that's really where the covenant became concrete too. Let's think about this. We as Jews have a relationship with God, and that is based on a covenant. What's a covenant? A contract, a pact, an agreement, something where each party has an obligation to the other party. So, you can't really have God having a covenant with a people until there is a people with whom to have a covenant. And that is what Pekudei really gave rise to, us as a people. Now, sure, if you want to look at the numbers, there's one God, there's one covenant, there's one people. Oh, but wait, God is one, covenant's one, but there are millions of people. There must be an individual covenant. Bobby has his covenant, Susie has her covenant. Not true. What this parasha symbolizes is that we, every one of us, gave something, contributed something, invested something. And so we are not individually in a covenant. We have a share of one covenant, our people's covenant with God. Everyone's a shareholder. It's not individual covenants. We all have some skin in the game. We're all investors in this. And that's important to know, because if some people feel like, well, they contributed, but I didn't, so maybe I don't have to do these things, or these mitzvot don't apply to me. No, everyone did, as a community. And that's important, because community in the Jewish world is a very central focus. Think about this. What is the reason for a minyan? Why do we have to have 10 people? A quorum to pray? Well, you could read prayers by yourself, and you could read prayers even that a minyan requires by yourself. But the reason you're not allowed to is because community, prayer together, is something that Hashem wants for us. So the rule is we have to have enough people to have a community in order to really complete this prayer service. And the sense of community coalescing is really one of the key takeaways of the Pekudei Parashah. Now, there's something also to consider, and that is that we have in Judaism, and I know a lot of people maybe have had questions about this, I know I have, when you see a person reading or learning or praying, that person might rock back and forth. And I don't exactly know the reason for it. A rabbi once told me that the rocking back and forth, the forward and backward motion, symbolizes love of God, fear of God. Love of God, fear of God. Keep that in balance. Ahavat Shamayim and Yirat Shamayim. So, when the Mishkan was completed, that became what? God's dwelling place on earth. That's not to say God isn't everywhere. That's not to say there's somewhere that God isn't. But that was God's dwelling place on earth. So, that brought about a real manifestation of this Ahavat Shamayim and Yirat Shamayim. And I want to address those two things. We can start with Yirat Shamayim. Think about this. If a friend says to you, hey, where's God? You could say everywhere. The mountains, the trees, light years up in space. But what if God were somewhere close by? What if God were in your neighborhood? Think about this. What if your friend said, hey, where's God? And you said, 2 blocks down, turn left, across from the post office next to the laundromat. That's where God's hanging out. You would think long and hard about the actions you take, the choices that you choose to make for yourself, the decisions, the thoughts you have, all of those things, if God were right there. And so, when you consider the context of the previous parashot, where the Jewish people have made a golden calf, constantly bickered with Moses, that's God's way of saying, hey, I'm here, you're here. So if you're thinking something you shouldn't do, check yourself. Because I'm very visible as far as the cloud and the fire and things like that. Check yourself. I'm right here. That's a Yirat Shamayim component. But hey, who are these people who are supposed to check themselves? They're people who not long ago were slaves. You could be forgiven as an Israelite for thinking, maybe the Egyptians are the chosen people. Why wouldn't they be the chosen people? They got to keep us as slaves, and not just over the weekend, but for generations on end. They must have done something to lose that, and that's the only reason we're free. You could be forgiven as an Israelite for having that thought. And God realized that, and by coming and dwelling as the Shekhinah in the Mishkan, what God is saying is, hey, I didn't just bring you out of Egypt for nothing, to bring you to this desert. I brought you out for a purpose, a greater glory, my side of the covenant, giving you this promised land, getting you there safely. This is a way of God's love. But his presence among us is also a way for us to hold him accountable just as he holds us accountable. And we have every right as a people to do that, given what this generation had been through. And this is God's way of saying, hey, look, I'm not just going to hand you $50 and drop you off at the bus station. I'm going to get you the rest of the way. Why? Because I'm going with you. I'm rolling with you on this journey. So that is a reassurance to the people that they're not going to feel what they felt in Egypt, abandoned by God. And that's an important thing to consider. God is like a father, we're taught. A father can certainly take off his belt and hit you, but he's also going to dry your tears and tells you he loves you after he's taught you something. And this is something that the Mishkan really represents. Now, strangely, the Mishkan gave way to the temple, and we don't know where it is anymore, what happened, who knows. But the Mishkan in its own way is back. And the temple, right now, I like to say we're between temples. We're between temples right now. Doesn't exist, but we have our shuls. And what is at the front, the focal point of every shul? An Aron HaKodesh, which is what? A representation of the Mishkan. So whether you're in a Sephardic synagogue with the balcony and the bima in the center of the sanctuary, or whether you're in a different type of synagogue where there's a bima at the front of the sanctuary, no matter what, everyone's facing the Aron HaKodesh when they pray. And the symbolism there is that the Mishkan, and then by extension the Aron HaKodesh, where the Torah is housed, which isn't quite the Shekhinah, but it's still something very precious and very holy, is the focal point of our worship. When the Aron HaKodesh is open, no one is supposed to be seated. When the Aron HaKodesh is open, any vow or prayer you make is taken more seriously and given more weight. And the Mishkan was the beginning of that. So, really as a people, the book of Exodus solidified us. But the capstone on all of that occurred in this parashah. Thank you very much for coming out and honoring Noah.